sometimes we get so busy that the only time we interact or communicate might be in a board meeting or on a Sunday morning, whereas, you know, if you can find a way maybe to grab a lunch or maybe, you know, take your pastor and his wife out to dinner, you know, if it's convenient for them. But just, again, establishing that relationship.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that, right? I think the relationship in my mind is such a big deal. You know, and I think as a board member you have a responsibility. You know, I think if a pastor has that in them, I think they have a responsibility to develop it, because a one-way relationship isn't great. But as a board member, you know, making yourself available, you know, what have you done through the course of your interactions with your senior pastor to demonstrate that he can trust you, right? So as a pastor comes in and is new to the board, he's still figuring it out. He's still figuring out, who are you, you know, I mean, how are you wired? I mean, can I confide in you? And can I confide in you, and do you hold that trust, and are you supportive of me, or do I confide in you and you use that confidence as a weapon at times in meetings or something? So I think, you know, what am I doing to show you as a pastor that I can, that they can trust you, right? And so I think that it's the relationship. I think it's trust. You know, when they broach subjects, are you always a critic, right? Or do you affirm the person even if you don't affirm the idea? You know, and I think there's things like that, because again, and every pastor is different, right? But I think a lot of pastors feel that they're there to cast vision, right? That they feel the weight of leadership. If things aren't going well, they feel it. As much as you feel it as a board member, they feel it 10 times more, because they feel that God called them there. They feel that God has them there for a reason. If things aren't going well, they can carry that weight, right? And so they come with ideas on change and what do we need to do, right? And if the board member is always, well, we can't. That's not a, you know, if that's what it is, boy, that doesn't feel like a very safe place. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't speak your mind, right? But when you speak your mind in honesty and love out of a basis of trust and relationship, it sounds different and it feels different. So that's the balance I think a board member wants, right? Is I'm there to provide insight and advice, you know, but I'm also there to provide encouragement and support. And so, you know, being aware of that, right? And board members feel it too, right? I mean, just having served on the board, and you guys know, hey, when we're in and out, always, you know, if there's something happening, you feel the weight of it, and you worry about the health of the church, and you worry about the hurt that a family had, or whatever it might be. But remember, your pastor is feeling that, and so I think it's about relationship and again establishing trust. We still have time here in this area. Again, you guys can jump in with anything. Maybe let's.
We have a wonderful leadership team, but I was just wondering, have you guys, three guys, ever thought about moving to Grand Forks? I'm just asking. I thought I'd pray about that. I'm just.
Not since the flood.
And we have a great leadership team, so but we are looking to add. But anyway.
Well, one of the things that after many years of things, I developed a board prayer and breakfast every Friday morning, and we would meet at 7 o'clock. The prayer requests were on the altar. No talking, no messing around, because time was such a small window. And they walked in and they took the prayer requests. We prayed over those for about 20 minutes. We had a small group prayer at the altar, and the restaurant was already ready for us at 7:30. And we head there to eat. And that really helped me to build camaraderie and communication. Because from the pastor's point of view, you've got a unbelievable variety of board people come to you. Some are experienced people, and some are paperclip counters, you know, I mean, you know, You know what I mean? But if you can get on the same page and you can have this fellowship time, prayer time, fellowship time, it was a great tool. Most of the people that went off my board, their term was done, they'll tell you they missed Friday morning.
Yeah, because you were establishing relationship at a spiritual level, yeah?
Yeah, a lot of things, yes. We were camaraderie, spiritual level. Occasionally, we would deal with an issue, but it'd be a very small issue. We need to make a decision on da-da-da, it would be a very small issue. We didn't spend a lot of time
I love that insight.
on that. That was very helpful to me.
Awesome.
Excuse me.
No worries. So gentlemen, I think just where we're at in the day, I think we'll move to potential challenges for board members. And so maybe we'll start with the first one. What are the most difficult issues I potentially deal with as a board member? And Dave, you know, I know you want to go first.
I think if I think about it, the most difficult ones were when people weren't happy.
Yeah.
And just to be somewhat transparent within our church, for us, the issue was the way the church operated, and that it was, if you will, a board-operated church, a board-run church, with input from the congregation through the board to the pastor. And it made it really difficult. And, you know, there's a problem when, I'm laughing because Nathan's sitting in the room here, but when somebody says, you know, I've had some people come to me and they're upset about this. It's like, okay, who and how many and who are they? You know, I mean, in the end, it wasn't productive, and it kept us in this pattern, and it was greatly frustrating. So just, you know, that understanding of, you know, this isn't, sometimes, you know, church isn't a democracy all the time. It's, you know, if we're gonna get anywhere, you know, the pastor has been called, you know, to cast vision. And as a board member, I can tell you that I would not want to be responsible for the vision of my church. And so I need to be careful about how, you know, I project my preferences, if you will. And, you know, so that was challenging. And I don't know if there's any other churches that have ever had that issue, but in the last year here, for about a 6-month period, I was the treasurer at the church, the interim treasurer, and so I got to sit in on several board meetings, you know, as not a board member, but watching this board interact with the pastor. And it had totally shifted within our body. And it was now, the pastor was casting the vision, the board was coming alongside in support, and you know, that word unity, you know, I could see it happening, you know. And, you know, at this point, I was the oldest guy in the room. I used to be the youngest guy in the room, but now I'm the oldest. But it was a blessing, and so, yeah, those people issues and how you deal with them, and you know, to this day, people will still want to come to somebody and say, hey, I'm not happy. Okay, well, have you talked to the pastor about that? You need to go to him and express that. I'm not here to you know, I don't want to be the, you know,
Backdoor conduit.
yeah, you know, because I experienced it too many times, and it never benefited us. You know, and obviously maybe there are times where, you know, it might be an issue where you need to have a discussion, you know, but it can become a pattern. So for me, you know, I'll stop there and say it was dealing with those kinds of disgruntled people kind of issues and feeling like the weight was on me to make this right. when in reality, I couldn't. And I will say, you know, the change that I witnessed in this past year was like, it was a very positive change. And it has been positive for our church.
From your perspective.
I agree with Dave on a lot of what he's saying, that it is certainly a difficult area when the congregation feels a certain way and the pastor feels a different way, to communicate that. Another area that I think is somewhat difficult for the board is trying to address the pastor's needs, pastor and the pastor's family. Are those needs being met? And it's not always financial. Financial is a big part of it, that, again, the pastor and his family need the financial means to survive too. And in small churches, that may end up being that the pastor has to work a second job. And fortunately, we've not had to do that, but again, the board needs to ensure that that pastor is taken care of. If he's under the stress of say financially, not being able to meet his obligations, that makes it extremely difficult for him to apply himself to the pastor position as well. So I think that's another difficult area for the board. Possibly in larger churches, it's not necessarily an issue, but with smaller ones, I know I've spoken with Pastor Titus a few times, and he's indicated that a lot of home missions churches really struggle financially. You know, fortunately, ours is good. You know, we're sitting with no debt and so forth. And but again, making sure that we're taking care of all the areas and not just our own.
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah,
Okay, talking about the financial situation and everything with the pastor's family,
yeah.
the pastor's wife is one that, I guess, and it's maybe something that the board could monitor, but as far as how they get along with the women's group or whatever there, because I had gotten a list of prayer things, and it was entitled, How to Pray for Your Pastor's Wife.
Yeah,
And that really helps, but there are so many different personalities, and coming to a small town, some of them, that's a hard step. You know, so it's like, who are my friends now? I have nobody to go out coffee with. Yeah, the big church, little church is quite a step.
yeah. it's
And I was
different
just
deal.
gonna say, it's maybe just something to monitor.
Yeah, right, not just focus on the pastor, but his wife,
His wife
and
too.
what she's feeling, making her feel welcome.
Yeah, because if, we always laugh, if mom ain't happy, nobody's happy.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
We don't know what you're talking about.
Man, I love that insight. I think when I think about the difficult part of being a board member, I would say, if you're leading, right, conflict will occur. You know, and so you gotta be comfortable with that tension, and you have to be good at resolving conflict in a healthy manner, right? I'm a guy who just wants to avoid it, right? And so I don't like dealing with conflict, and so but you've gotta step up to the plate. And, you know, whether that's conflict that you're feeling with your pastor, and again, it's how do I resolve that? I support you, I value, I'm with the mission, and make it about you're not wrong, the vision's, I'm struggling with this, so can you help me talk through that, right? That conversation can oftentimes be more comfortable than when it's conflict between board members. You know, I mean, there can be conflict among board members around those things, and so I think, you know, it's, as a board, it comes back to like servanthood in itself, and I have, you know, preferences, I have perspectives, you know. A lot of people that are on boards got to boards because they're leaders. and leaders wanna have vision, and they wanna drive. There can only be one vision. Right, there can only be one vision. And you gotta, and we have to kinda resolve, you know, if there's not unity on the vision, there can be healthy iron sharpening iron, or the devil can win, and you can get this going. Right, and this is never good, because it sucks energy out of the board, it sucks energy out of the pastor, and the devil is so happy, because I'm doing this. You know, so that to me is the challenge, because you probably have high capacity people on your board. And so when we're unified, what an awesome thing we are for the kingdom of God. You know, when we're not, you know, and so recognizing that and do what you can. So to me, that was it. And that's not about bad people. That's about, we all have personality traits. We all think differently. You know, I remember, so I was on the board when Pastor Glowley was here, he left, and then Pastor Doug Graham, or Dr. Doug Graham now, he heads up Upper Central, came in. One of the things, the first thing he did, one of the things when he was interviewing is he, can't remember which thing he did, but he did like a strengths finder. He kind of laid that out in his resumes. Kind of walking in, here's who I am. Here is where I am when I'm operating in my sweet spot and when I'm effective. And by default, you know, then it means if you take the time to really dig into that, you understand, oh, okay, he's gonna start to lead like this, he's gonna do this, and these are areas where he's gonna, right, need some help, right? And that's not, and none of us are good in every area, you know? And so recognizing that again, come around and doing that, but conflict is always the thing. I think as a board, you know, one of the things, you know, you have to figure out is, hey, when we have votes on things, does it have to be unanimous? Is it a simple majority? I don't know the right answer. You know, I think the pastor would love it to be unanimous, but really unanimous, not like yes, and then I go back as a board member and talk to the 4 people. I can't believe we did that. You know, I mean, that's not unanimous, that's fake, right? You know, I think unanimous can be dangerous, because then one person can hold the board hostage, you know, with a dissenting opinion. I think if there's not, you know, if you have a 7-person board and it's 4-3, that's a little bit scary. You know, so I think as a board that's working through, hey, let's work toward consensus. Do we table things? And I think a pastor has a role to play in that, right? As a leader, to figure out how to do that. And, hey, where do I have one-off conversations on things? And again, it's about trying to gain consensus and keep us unified. And again, as a board, I don't think you're a yes person. I think you have something to offer your lead pastor in the way of wisdom, in the way, you know, I agree we don't want to be a backdoor conduit, right? So, you know, don't be the person where they always come to you and complain about the pastor, right? I mean, that has to kind of, that valve can only be so big if you're getting good input. Yeah, I just think,
You know, one thing, over those 6 months that I was the observer and tried not to offer input, though I think I exceeded probably what I should have, even though I wasn't a board member, but I observed the importance of board members expressing their thoughts, and when, you know, instead of just saying, sounds
Yeah.
good, Pastor, we're on board, you know, which is great if, you know, we're in unity, but at the same time, I could, you know, I observed the strength that came from saying, well, Pastor, have you thought about this? Or, I don't know about that, but what about this? And, you know, there was a spirit of support and unity there. It wasn't said in a, you know, like, I'm not with you, but it's like, and I know for Pastor Dan, you know, and he expressed it to me, he says, I value that input, you know, when, he says, I wanna hear what they're thinking, because when we make a decision, you know, we've covered everything, right, as much as we can with, because every board member has something to offer as well.
I love that, right? And when you express it, and I feel safe here,
Yes.
then that's not a threatening opinion, even if I'm not fully on board right away.
Yeah. And I, you know, you talk about the not being unanimous, you know, and I remember some tough meetings walking out 5-2, you know, it's like, it was the worst feeling, you know, because of this, the spirit in which it occurred there.
Yeah.
And it was so important that we were in unity. And I can tell you, it was reflected that in the outcome going forward.
You know they're always right when they do it my way. You have to watch out for that too.
Yeah.
You know, I think as pastors, we need to learn to, like you said, good people skills and learn to work with people. For example, in the last board in the Assembly of God, I had a man that owned and operated a nursing home. I had another man on my board that owned and operated Service Master. Had many these people had many employees under them. And all of a sudden, they're sitting on the church board. They're not going to be silent. I mean, that's why you have them on there. It's their spirit. You know, if you got an ugly spirit, then you got another problem. But I think we have to be very open to this discussion and having good input, because you're bringing all this experience on the board. It can be a tremendous thing. You can be threatened by it, or you can be appreciated. So you have all these people with all this abilities and talents, and they're running their companies. And all of a sudden, they're sitting on the board and they're saying, okay, get on board with my vision. You say, well, wait a minute, maybe I better do some homework here as a pastor to get them on my page.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things I love about Pastor Josh, right? I'm not on the board anymore, but I get to sit in, because they're always caring about what the finances are, so I get to sit on at least part of them. And Pastor Josh, right, I mean, he'll go around to a man, where you at? Where you at, right? So I think as a pastor, right, when you invite feedback, and the board member knows, hey, when you're doing that, I know that, right, you're asking for the invitation, so I know it's safe to offer.
Yeah.
So I think a
Well,
pastor.
and you
is-
want that. You want that input from that experience, because those guys have been around the block, and they have their own boards, sometimes in their own corporations or whatever, and so,
Yeah.
you know.
Just off of that, because he was mentioning like business owners on boards and stuff, so our board has like two business owners and myself. I'm very business minded, but what's a good way to think like business, because obviously church isn't a business, you know, but it kind of is in a sense, but think like business, but with the ministry at the heart of that. Like, do you have, I guess, good ideas for that to, because, you know, you don't want to hinder ministry, but as a businessman, you think, well, why are we spending all this money on this type of thing?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I'll maybe start, and then Dave, maybe you can come alongside that. So I think there's two parts to that, right? And I think you could be asking about an entrepreneurial mindset, but I don't think you're doing that. I think you're talking more about kind of almost like an ROI on ministries, maybe?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that as a board, and maybe that's diving half into finances, is your responsibility, you have a stewardship responsibility for the resources that God's put in there, right? And so I think the board has to look at, you know, which we do here, right, is, hey, here's all the different ministries we have, what are we spending on them? Because there are 1,000 good things the church could be doing, right? And you have to figure out what, in this season, right, what is the return that I'm getting, right? And so I think there's nothing wrong with looking at ministries and saying, are they being effective? I think in a church, there are golden cows. And so some ministries maybe need to either go on hiatus or possibly move away. You have to be smart about how to do those, because there's always somebody's heart in that. So I don't think there's anything wrong in looking at that. I think by the same token, you know, you talked about it, there could be ministries that, you know, maybe don't look like they're getting a return, but you know you should do them, right? And that becomes the wisdom of the board and then the pastor on what to do. But I think evaluating your ministries and what you're spending on your ministries and where they're at is a healthy thing to do. I don't know if you want to add anything to that?
So the ministry side is one side, and I don't know when you asked the question, my mind went to, there may be the way that we've always done it at our church, right? The way we've conducted business, decisions we made, maybe it has to do with investing excess funds or just out of the box kind of ideas. That is, a business owner is gonna look at that and say, why do we do it that way? We could get a better return on our finances if we do it this way, or it's a totally different approach to ministry. And, you know, those are the moments where everybody else sits back and goes, why do we do it that way? You know, we've always done it that way, that's why we do it that way. And as long as it, for me, you know, again, that's the benefit of having different minds on the board where they see something differently. If it doesn't compromise our integrity, if it doesn't blur the lines of, you know, what's okay to do and what's not okay to do, if we can maintain our fiduciary responsibility, then yeah, we want to hear your idea, and maybe we need to change things. So, you know, you're young, and so you're coming onto the board, and you probably have some different ideas than what some of the other people do, and so, you know, if you offer that, you know, you offer it in the right spirit, and just say, hey, this is, you know, a thought I had, you know, and I think it's a great benefit to have that perspective.
I think where we're at. So Vern, you know, you guys have had some pastoral transitions, so maybe just talk about, you know, the impact on that on the church, maybe just how it's been for the board and walking through that.
Yeah, we've gone through several, actually. Not real close together, but the toughest part on a transition, I think, is if you have a pastor that is leading that everyone was really fond of. Then the expectation of the newcomer is that he has to be better than the last one, and that makes it really tough on that pastor to try to live up to an expectation like that. And that's where the congregation needs to understand we have a different person here. He may not have the same thoughts and priorities that the last one had. And sometimes it's almost better to have a period in between, just so that some of the memories of the last pastor can fade away a little bit. But I think getting the congregation to understand this is a new pastor and they have possibly new ideas, and don't hold the new pastor to the same standard you had the last pastor. Not that there's anything bad there, but it's sometimes tough for a congregation, I would say, and the board as well, because the old thing, this is the way we've always done it, you know. If you get a bunch of curmudgeons that are sitting on the board, sometimes it's hard to get the board to accept new ideas too. And that, again, makes it that much tougher on the new pastor. So, the open-mindedness, I guess I'd say, when a new pastor's coming in is very, very important. And if you don't have that, it makes it really tough for everybody.
I would 100% concur with that, right? I've been on the board, we had Pastor Dwelly, we had Graham, and then we had Pastor Josh, right? And I think, you know, everybody kind of sort of half expects, if they would really examine their heart, for the next person to kind of keep exactly what was happening happen it. And God usually calls different leaders to do different things, and they come with different strengths. And I think if the board can kind of adopt that and be open, I like your word, being open to that. You set a better stage for the next pastor that's coming in. And I think you talked about the pastor's wife. There it is funny, the expectations on pastors' wives, right? Because each of those have different giftings, different passions in their heart. And so I think it comes, you know, almost as a couple. We have to flush those, that rejoice in what we had, but be open for what the new thing is that God's going to do. Do you want to add anything on transition?
It's, you know, it's, you said every pastor has different giftings and strengths, and, you know, maybe sometimes of course we expect too much, because we want our pastor to be strong in every single area, just like we are, right? But, you know, one pastor has a pastoral heart, and he's just great at taking care of people, and another one he's a great leader, and he's got vision, but he may not have a pastoral heart, and so I think you have to be accepting of that, and understand what the strengths and weaknesses are, and again, the other thing is, as I said earlier, I think pastors are getting younger, so they do things differently, you know, there's changes.
Us getting older?
It is. And if you're young now, just give it a few years and you'll be there, but, you know, to embrace some of those changes, you know, as you said, Vern, you know, I mean, to me, you know, it blesses me when there's somebody who's, you know, a little bit older like Vern is and who has experience, but yet is able to embrace change and say, you know what, I know we have always done it this way, but we have to change our methods sometimes. We have to be willing in order to touch this generation. They're not looking for the same things that, you know, our parents or what we were when we came into the church, so.
I love that. I think it's almost 10, and so I just wanted to wrap up with just a perspective. And in 1 Samuel 14, we hear about the story of Jonathan and his armor bearer. And so, to set the stage, right, the Israelites are at war with the Philistines. And Jonathan and his armor bearer find themselves at a pass at Michmash. So there's kind of a Philistine outpost on either side. And so they're not, you know, I mean, looking at the thing, we see a battlefield. And the first thing I want you to remember out of that is that you are in a battlefield. You are in spiritual leadership. You are in a battlefield. And the enemy would like nothing better than to defeat you. Every church God has in a community to reach a specific set of people, and you aren't like another church. You don't have to be like another church. You're there for that battle and that community, for those hearts and for those unlost, you know, those people who are lost. So don't ever forget that you're in a battle. And so Jonathan and the armor bearer decide to go to a unique place in the battle. And so Jonathan has a vision for action, right? And so he says in verse 6, let's go across to the outpost of those pagans. Jonathan said to his armor bearer, perhaps the Lord will help us, for nothing can hinder the Lord. He can win a battle whether he has many warriors or only a few, right? And so the leader, the pastor, has a vision. He knows he's in a battlefield, and he develops, I think this is where God wants to do it. And so this is us, the board members, right? This, I think, really comes to do it, right? The armor bearer says, do what you think is best. The armor bearer replied, I'm with you completely, whatever you decide. And I love, actually, the NIV. He says, do all that you have in mind, his armor bearer said. Go ahead, I am with you, heart and soul. I am with you, heart and soul. And what a privilege it would be for a pastor to know that his armor bearers are with him, heart and soul, as he looks at what seems to be the insurmountable thing. Notice that the first response of the armor bearer was not criticism of the idea, because there's like an outpost here and an outpost here, and in the flesh, the armor bearer could have said, "Are you crazy?" Right, which that response would have been not only cutting at the idea, but cutting at the person. I am with you, heart and soul. And they didn't just act, right? Because here's what Jonathan says in verse 8. "All right then," Jonathan told him, "we will cross over and let them see us. If they say to us, 'Stay where you are, or we'll kill you,' then we will stop and not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come on up and fight,' then we will go up. That will be the Lord's sign. That will be the Lord's sign that he will help us defeat them." So there was a vision, there was support, and then there was seeking the Lord. Right? Hey, I have a vision. Now let's see if we can get some confirmation. Right? And then we read, "When the Philistines saw them coming, they shouted, 'Look, the Hebrews are coming out of their holes.' Then the men from the outpost shouted to Jonathan, 'Come on up here and we'll teach you a lesson. Come on up, climb right behind me,' Jonathan said to his armor bearer, 'for the Lord will help us defeat them.' And so they climb up and we read about them defeating them. And then the Lord covered it and there was a panic and everybody fled. And I think that's a picture of what an effective board member plays. Right? You're in a battle. You're there to support and lead. It doesn't mean you don't provide input and insight, but in the end, don't forget you're in a battle. Don't let this happen. Right? Unify and then go fight the battle. So that's kind of what we had, man. I'm grateful for these gentlemen and their wisdom and for, providing their insight. I have something for you guys when you leave. This is a handout. It has on it there's something called the Unstuck Group, and it talks effective church boards. It is a perspective. It's not the answer, but it just has some interesting things in there. It talks about that the primary responsibilities of a board member are modeling spiritual leadership, providing encouragement and accountability to the lead pastor. And there's some other things in there. And then I just have kind of some of the attributes of an armor bearer. So you can take one of those where you go. Any questions before you go?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Good to see you.
I have some other questions.
Yeah. me
How's
too.
that?
I have some other questions for another time.
Yeah, we didn't even hit the finance part.
Well, yeah, I've had some written down, those guys. We're trying to set up some things, so.
If any of you wanted to talk about finances or anything.
Yeah, we're still here. We have nowhere to
Still here
go.
for us?
Because you had mentioned you guys set up a finance committee.
Take one and
You
pass it
guys
on.
have one too. I think we're looking at this, starting that, just kind of save some time on board.
Well, that even
Did you
just
set up-
gets
is
into
that what we
governance.
said, or did you guys set up a
Structure.
finance?
It's
Yeah,
fine.
well, that's what I was
Somebody
going to
do it.
get at, is like, what's your layout for a finance, like, cause we're looking at like 2 board members, 2 congregation members, and obviously lead pastors, lead pastors.
That's not all dictated by your bylaws?
I don't think we have it in there yet.
So you'd be
We don't have a
modifying.
finance committee or any of that yet, so.
Wondering what your options actually
You're looking at setting up a finance committee, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
See, in our church, the board takes care of it, again, we're a
Well,
very
that's-
small congregation.
Currently, how we do it is just the board handles everything, but, it's just.
We have a mixture of lay people and a couple board members always, and 3 lay people. Sometimes that goes 3-2 either way, but,
And so you guys have a separate kind of like subcommittee or?
yeah, so we meet monthly, go through the financials and try and save some of the work that the board would have to do, save some time in the board meeting. And then, finance committee can only make a recommendation, we'll pass the recommendation on then to the board.
Love that.
So it's essentially just like they go through, basically the finance, if someone has a special budget request or whatever, they go through, answer all the questions, find out all the info, and then say to the board, like, yeah, we recommend that we do this, or, and this is why, or, no, we don't, because this, and
You
this.
know, in that case, that could come to the finance committee, but we're probably more likely, our meeting, we're going to cover, for instance, the April financials, how does it look, how are we doing compared to budget?
Okay.
And if there are, say, maybe there's some investments that are maturing or whatever, looking at what the interest rates are and making a recommendation, executive pastor is also on that committee and actually chairs that committee. Come budget time in the fall, we run October through September 30th fiscal year. And we'll go through the budget, look at, different categories, and then ultimately approve a final draft of the budget, which then gets passed on to the board for approval, and then of course to the congregation at the end of business meeting. But,
You guys actually have like a copy of your completed budget just to the
You might have
congregation.
been there when I was there.
it's in our annual report. It's
Okay,
right in
yeah,
there.
yeah, we do it in annual.
Yep, it's right
You
in
do
there.
the budget, not just the financials.
Oh, wait, yeah, I guess we do just.
You know, so-
Financial snapshot, not like a complete breakdown.
So
The budget, the
budget's approved.
executive,
Church can't.
whoever, the treasurer, basically develops that along, and then the finance committee comes alongside and says, okay, here's where we're at, of course, we have to project certain things, what kind of income, general fund income, what are we gonna have this year, what do we wanna project for missions income, and, staffing, maybe that's an issue, if we wanna add a person. If we do that, do we have money left at the end of the year, so, and then at the same time, in the budget process, the ministry leaders, the pastors, they get to submit, music wants this, and kid men, they want this, and it's a wish list, and if it doesn't fit into the final thing, then some things may get cut or delayed a little bit, but yeah, it's a good process. I mean, again, would save some time in the board meeting as well.
Yeah, so at Evangel, right, because I was on the board for a long time. So the treasurer used to do it on the board, kind of do that, and then would meet with the pastor. And I think our board used to be, our church used to be a lot more board driven, and I think it's flipped over the last probably 8 years into more, the board's operating, I would say, at a higher level right now than not as much in the minutia. And so now I work as a business administrator with all the ministry leads on the budget. I meet with the treasurer. On the budget, we set that, the board approves it at a macro level. They have access to the whole detail, but we typically roll it up into, they're approving it. They're mostly looking at like a one-page budget and looking at staffing, operations, ministry, CapEx expenses, and that's kind of our general fund. And then we call it legacy makers, which I would say for a lot of churches, they might call it our missions.
Kingdom builders.
Yeah, kingdom builders, so we'll look at that and what do we hope the Lord's gonna do and try to do that so they'll approve it. And then we present a one-page, the board typically, on a month is looking at a one-page kind of dashboard on, here's where our revenue giving, we project where it might end, are we on track? They're looking at where are we at in relation to budget in those, kind of macro level categories that I called out, where are we at in the legacy makers, what's our kind of cash position, and looking over the past 4 months, and if we have any debt, where are we at on debt, and then there's some metrics that we look at. They have access to like 30 pages of information, but the conversation is usually triggered there, and then I'm usually meeting with the treasurer, and we're kind of saying, hey, what are the, here's obviously the one-page thing, and the board can ask any questions they want on anything, but what do we think are the 2 or 3 things that we want to bring to the board as focal points that require decision and conversation?
Thanks, John.
And then we publish annual financials, but not the annual budget,
Okay.
so that we present to the membership. That's kind of the way it works here. I kind of like the concept of, where we do it, and I think in smaller churches it works I would say probably different.
Yeah, again, our board handles all, our budgeting aspect is kind of fly by night, actually, based as much on balancing the checkbook as anything else.
Yeah.
Can we afford to do this, look at it at the time? But,
There was a point in our board meetings where we were getting so wrapped up in some of these little details of the finances, we have this long agenda, and you know that they're gonna be time consuming. It's like, why are we doing this, you know, why are we micromanaging, if you will?
Well, that's part of the reason why we're looking into it too, because you have those budget meetings, when you have that in your board meeting currently, like it's a long meeting. Because I mean, it's people's money, it's God's money and all that, so you wanna make the right decision and all that. And there's always emotion a little bit involved when you're talking about money too, and people.
Yep, and there's probably however many board members are in the room, and a pastor, there's that many opinions.
Yeah, so. Do you think, I'll have to take up more time, but, by posting actual budgets in your financial, like in your yearly meeting and stuff, do you think that helps the congregation with like more of a vision for giving and stuff like that? Cause like, or versus just like your straight financial, cause then they see like in just your financial, they see, oh yeah, we got this much cash on hand, we're good, we probably don't need to tithe as much. I mean, that's a hard issue on them, but like by actually like showing your budgets, like, yeah, this is what we're actually spending your money on, do you think that helps with some of that
I
at all?
don't know if it's that, I would say more in the area of transparency.
Okay.
I
You know.
agree.
Yeah, I think the vision for giving really, you know, sharing, the pastor sharing the ministries of the church, maybe it's a mission scene, or, you know, Pastor Dan just did a 4-week thing on giving, and we have so many new believers in our church that they don't really know the concept of tithing, so just, it's a instructional, you know, not a high pressure thing at all, but just, you know, the Lord says, test me in this, and so, but yeah, we've always had this format, if you will, and so if we removed it, all of a sudden it's like, you don't need that detail, you know, we'll take care of that for you. I mean, they're free to ask questions, you know, sometimes, you know, one of the uncomfortable questions were right in the middle of the annual business meeting, somebody would say, well, let's see the staff salaries, you know, it's like, well, technically, you can come in and ask for that. We don't want to discuss that here. I mean, right now, we've got the wrong motive here. And that's damaging.
Yeah, one of the things, you know, we haven't published out, I mean, we talk about what we're spending, and we talk about that we actually have metrics for salaries that we look at. We use different kind of things. I always tell people, like, churchsalary.com is a great
Yeah.
place.
Do they have another session?
Probably.
We're gonna have
At
to go
10:15, yeah, churchsalary.com is a great place to
Is
get.
that the one you guys use? 'Cause
It's
there's multiples.
it's one of a couple that we look at, and we also get,
We use the bathroom again.
I think for the senior pastor, we also have a consultant kind of help us with that.
Yeah,
You gonna-
So depending on your church size,
Yeah, I'll be okay.
yeah,
we
'cause
do that.
church salary at your scale is not really a great comp.
No, but at least, it's a way to at least a finger in the
Yeah.
air,
Yeah.
and it gives you some good stuff. So,
Well, thank you guys.
yeah,
Thanks for the questions.
thank you. Nice to meet you.
I didn't know who was, in this position down here when I stepped in there.
Yeah, this breakout 4, I had like 4 different ones I wanted to go to.
Selfishly, I wanted to take half of today's,
Well, thanks for,
wanted to take a couple from
Oh,
today's,
yeah.
stick in yesterday.
you did a good
Yeah.
job.
Oh, thank
You
you.
did a good job.
Yeah.
Thank you, it was fun. Thank you for coming. Are you still on the legislature?
I was a school board. Yeah, well,
You did.
2021. It was just, I'm getting past that. I mean, I'm young Clark and it was really helpful.
I think so, so wherever you want, bro. I'll take it. Okay.
And he says, I'll take care of it. He's on his phone, he knows this and he well.
It's amazing what they can do.
I know. But now you were there, right before Sean.
I was there, I was there with Sean.
Yes, I was thinking of this. I know. I know, that's funny.
Yeah. Sorry.
don't even know if I can run it.
Oh, it's okay.
Where's your session?
No, no.
Okay, this is the, recruiting volunteers.
Just, yeah, volunteers.
Volunteers. Oh,
I guess so.
we all need volunteers.
Did you sit in on Kevin's?
Like, I didn't sit on that, no.
Yeah, but that one, like, she didn't sit in here because it was an order, but you. like,
Yeah, I should have went to the
You already gave all your notes.
Monica, what about this? What should I say?
Okay.
Where are we at with this?
Oh my goodness, that would have been torture.
Okay,
No,
well,
it
did
was
I-
good to see you. Yes, thank you.
Are you staying here through?
I gotta get back and prepare my sermon.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. You can learn something. You've lived it. Well, no. Feel free to say. Sometimes I'm really like, you're like, what are you talking about? Yeah. And when I'm practicing.
When you say for what? That's good. Like the blue ones, I like the blue ones good. How old are you? Should be three, should be that. Three? Pretty good little speaker for three. You can tell mom and dad exactly what you want, huh? And she's not. And everybody taught, I have three kids, and everybody told me about the terrible twos. And the twos were teenagers, they were doing. I'm
in a cohort with him 2 years ago. Well, right now, we're gonna be.
Yeah, I know.
My last one was Sarah Davidson. We just, supposed to have our audience on this week. Oh, yeah. That was my session, yeah. It was a good session. So, these are the fellowship. Yes, that was very good, you guys got. So that's, you know, like, 50 miles. Yeah. There's just a lot of smaller towns around us. Yeah, so New York to Stanley.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's great to have you. This session is volunteer powered churches. I thought I'd better look. The reason I mentioned that is because of the last session, a number of people stepped out. It was for those, I should say, there were a couple people stepped out, like, this is, so anyway, volunteer powered churches. I'm Nathan Johnson. This is my wife, Mary.
We're just gonna, most of you know us, I think we know a lot of you, but just to let you know who we are. We have known each other for a very long time. We have known each other this summer, it will be 50 years since we've known each other. So we were 9 and 10 when we grew up. We grew up together. Nathan's dad came to be my pastor. So you can do the math. We are gonna both be 60 this year. We're gonna celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary this year. So that's the stage of life we're in. We have 3 adult boys and almost 8, this in 2 weeks, in a few days, we'll have our 8th little grandbaby coming. So that's kind of, we're both one of 6 siblings, that we're both the third of 6, the middle child. So that's kind of who we are.
Graduated from Trinity Bible College many years ago in 1987, and then after that we went to Minot to be youth pastors, of which Monica here was in our youth
7th
group.
grade, were you in 7th grade? Yes.
You stayed just for me.
We felt a call specifically to Monica.
Christian wasn't me.
And we always laugh about Monica played basketball in high school, and so I was always like a little competitive, and so we would play one-on-one when we'd have all-nighters at the Y or whatever, so still haven't gotten over the defeat that I was.
You would beat him at horse, right? Yes. I'm sorry, I shouldn't tell that.
After we were there for 4 years, and then we went to South Dakota, a small rural church. The town was 650 people, and the church was somewhere around they averaged 37.5 on the last ACMR when we went there, and then we saw some growth in that time. And then after that, we were there for almost 9.5 years, and then we went back to Minot, where we had been youth pastors, and we were lead pastors there for 7 years. Again, of which Monica and her husband Kevin were associates with us for 6 years. So our paths have crossed a lot of different times anyway. So, and then after that, we moved to Grand Forks and we planted a church. That has been 15 years ago, and just a couple of weeks ago, we as a church celebrated our 14-year birthday. So I've now lived in Grand Forks longer than any other place in my entire life. And we love what we're doing there at the church planting, and I know we got a couple staff members here with us today, so I was telling Pastor Jared, I feel a little like when I'm doing premarital counseling, I'm like, it's so good Mary's not here, because she'd be like, what are you talking about? So anyway, today with the staff, we'll talk later, okay, whatever. Just remember who signs the payroll checks. One of the things, just thinking about it, all of our ministry settings, whether it was in youth ministry, whether it was pastoring a small rural church in southwestern South Dakota, or a church with multiple staff, one of the things that we've thought about is just one of the very different ministry settings, but one of the things that has been consistent is really the need for volunteers and for people to engage in serving. We cannot do ministry alone. We were never intended to do ministry alone. And so, in fact, I really believe this. I believe that the successes of our church is really, in large part, are contingent upon a healthy volunteer system. I think all of us want to have a healthy church. We want to be healthy. And yet oftentimes what my experience, and maybe this is just personal experience over these years, we have the priority that we've placed on serving and creating a system of volunteers is just like, yeah, we'll do that because we need to fill slots. And so if we were to figure out like why do we have volunteers? Why are we serving? Well, because we have to. So we have to have somebody that runs the sound. We need somebody that's going to be able to lead worship. We need a piano player because we have all these different slots, and our thinking has been we have to have people that fill the slots. And I think, and because of that, so we're just looking for people, and so we hold up a mirror to people, and if they can fog a mirror, then man, it's perfect, you're in, because we just gotta have it. I mean, if you don't, we're gonna die. I love what Pastor Kevin Anderson, Monica's husband, would say when we were pastoring together. He would say, the most ineffective way of, and we'll talk a little bit about this, the most ineffective way of raising volunteers is just while you know, our ministry is about to go down. And if you don't jump on board, you're not gonna make it. And so please jump on this sinking ship. Okay? And I don't want anything to do with that. But that can be how we do things in church. And Kevin would laugh about that. And why are we doing in different ministries that we're leading? That's the most ineffective way. And so I just think as we talk about this today, this is not just something this is a good idea. This is something I think is real, but this is so much a part of what we feel is our discipleship strategy. And we'll talk more about that, not just filling slots, but we're calling people into ministry.